Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bridging the Gap. Make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe. My name is Alvin. I lean right on most issues, and I'll be representing the Republican side.
My name is Luke. I lean left on most issues, and I'll be representing the Democratic side. Hey guys, so in this video, Alvin and I are going to be going over our 2024 predictions for the gubernatorial elections coming up in November.
Yup, so we've been doing all the races that have major implications for Americans across the country. Eventually, we'll be doing a House prediction too, but the last one we have after the presidential and the Senate is going to be the governor's races, which there aren't many of in a presidential year, but there are 11 that are up for grabs. Before we put in all the ones up for grabs, Democrats are up one governorship across the country. But as we start filling in the safe states that we won't really be talking about, let's do them right now for both sides. We will already be at 24 Republicans, 21 Democrats. And we're going to be talking about the final five. Let's start with some safe ones that don't have that much at play, but we wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with Vermont here because
Yeah.
Vermont's one of the quirkier ones. Um, Vermont's obviously a very blue state, and it typically votes for Democrats, but it actually currently has an incumbent Republican governor, Phil Scott, who is running for re-election. Uh, Now, Phil Scott is an interesting Republican because he's actually quite liberal, for a Republican. I mean, it makes sense for Vermont. I believe he voted for Biden in 2020. So yeah, there's like little things like that which are able to allow this Republican to appeal to Democrats in this blue state. And because of that, we think this state is going to be solidly Republican in 2024.
Yeah, it's not even close. I mean, just look at the 2022 election, for example. Phil Scott absolutely decimated the Democrat opponent. Let's go back to 2020 now. Oh, it was a presidential year. Oh well, doesn't really change anything. We go back to 2018, even in a blue wave. Doesn't matter. He wins by a safe margin. Um, this is just how it is, even if you go back to 2016. Wow, it was a Trump presidential year. Does not matter. Phil Scott has won every single time, and he's increased his margin every single time. He's now the most popular governor in the entire country, even though he is a Republican governor in the state of Vermont, one of the bluest, if not the bluest, uh, state in the country on the presidential level. So that's really interesting. But we're going to also touch on the state of Utah, which is also solidly Republican, but has a little bit of interesting thing going on there as well. The current governor is Spencer Cox, who is a somewhat of a moderate, like kind of, but Utah is obviously a weird state, so there's things that happen there. And there was a very interesting thing where the Republican, apparatus in the state of Utah did not have Spencer Cox as their nominee. They selected Phil Lyman, a state representative, as their nominee at the convention, which is really interesting. But the primary results had Spencer Cox winning. So the people chose Spencer Cox, but the party elite decided to back Lyman. And this is really interesting because it sort of is like, do parties choose their nominees or do the voters choose their nominees? And there's a lot of talk about this, recently, especially on the right, trying to attack, Biden and Harris, for swapping out their nominee at the last second at the convention. And now here it's all very interesting because now Cox seems like he's going to be on the ballot. And Phil Lyman sued but lost. And he's gonna apparently run a write-in campaign, but it's ultimately because of how red the state is, it's not gonna affect things too much, but it is interesting to note.
Yeah, I definitely agree here. Utah is it's a very, very interesting state. It's like one of those rare, like deep red states where more moderate Republicans, or anti-Trump Republicans rather, can emerge. Like it gave us Mitt Romney. Its next senator is also I feel it's like Representative Curtis, but I could be wrong. Um, but their next senator who's replacing Romney is also relatively moderate, and then obviously Spencer Cox is too. Um, but yeah, I don't really feel that this write-in campaign from Phil Lyman's going to go anywhere. I think, yeah, Cox has enough appeal and he's popular enough as of a governor to just win this by a solid margin. Hmm.
Yeah, it's not a special case where Cox is ultra unpopular, even though he doesn't have the backing of the Republican elite. And the primaries all obviously close. These Republicans, these Lyman backers are not about to let a Democrat run the state. So
Hmm.
that's just how it works. Now, there's three more races in the country that are at least a little bit competitive. None of them are extremely, extremely tight, I would say, in my opinion. With maybe you
Hmm.
could argue New Hampshire could be tight, but let's first talk about Washington. And
Hmm.
I know you've been looking at the primary election results at Washington very closely. So why don't you start on this race?
Yeah, so in this election in the Washington gubernatorial election here, we have Bob Ferguson, the current attorney general, running against Dave Reichart. Okay, so Dave Reichart is a former representative. He's generally seen as a moderate. He represented a swing district, the 8th district of Washington. He also was, I believe, the head sheriff of the largest county in Washington, which I believe is Kings County. It's the one with the
King
Seattle,
County.
the
Yep.
largest city. Yep. So, I mean, this is a more moderate Republican running against a Democrat. So he has been generally polling pretty decently. Um, but something interesting about the Washington primary system is they put all the candidates running for an office on the same primary ballot. So Democrats and Republicans, instead of just voting for their primary candidates, they vote they could vote for whoever of either party, and basically it gives us a good tell, especially the one in Washington, of where the candidates stand in terms of their percentage of the vote. So now we see in this primary election here, Bob Ferguson secured 45% of the primary vote, and Dave Reichart secured 27.5%. If you add up all the total Democratic vote total, and the total Republican vote total here, and you see who's leading by weighing all the Democrats running and all the Republicans running, you get a result of Democrats leading by 12 points. That's pretty good. I mean, it's in our range for a solid margin, but compared to other Democrats in Washington, it's definitely not as good. This is definitely shaping up to be a closer race, comparatively at least to the other races in the state of Washington. But ultimately, I think it's still going to be solidly in the Democratic column. I mean, this kind of just reminds me of 2022 when you had, if you recall, with the Senate race with Tiffany Smiley running against Patty Murray, and everyone thought it would be a closest race. Polling even suggested that, but the Democrat ended up winning by a solid margin, by like 14 points. So I think this is just going to be end up in a similar fashion with the Democrats winning by double digits.
Yeah, so you look at the very little polling we've gotten where Ferguson has totally been fine in recent polling. Obviously, Democrats have also improved. I would say if Biden was still in the race, we could be talking about this going likely with how bad the vibes were and everything, and just Democrats were probably just not going to get out to the polls. With Harris in the race, I agree with you. I think this does remind me of Smiley as well. I don't like the vibes coming out from Washington with how it seems to be a little tease for Republicans. It really does remind me of the Tiffany Smiley race 2 years ago. So I'm going to go safety for now. I think
Hmm.
if we got a lot of reputable polling, we could decide to move it. But for now, weak polling, um, pretty standard race here. Although, of course, the primary was weaker for Ferguson. He obviously did not break 50%, and it was very weak compared to the other races. But
Yeah.
we'll have to see as this goes. Obviously, I don't think there's a 0% that Reichert wins, but it's probably below 5%. So yeah, let's move on to North Carolina, which, North Carolina is generally considered as a swingy state, right? It's probably favored to vote Trump right now at the presidential level, but it has an incumbent Democrat governor who was voted in alongside the state voting for Trump in 2020, in Roy Cooper. Now, you have an interesting sitch here because Mark Robinson is the current lieutenant governor, which you would think he presents a very strong candidate, for the Republican side as he's the lieutenant governor. He's the current second in command, right? And Josh Stein is also a decently strong candidate on the Democrat side, as the attorney general. So they both hold statewide office, with Robinson having the higher office. But Robinson has shown some weaknesses that have been very well exploited by the Democrat Party here. And especially the statewide race in North Carolina have favored the Democrats for a while. Robinson has a lot of very controversial things going on in his past, a lot of very controversial comments, very extreme comments on things from abortion rights to, the gay community to religion. He's very, very far right. A lot of things he says, and it does turn off a certain voter base. And independents here are, there's going to be a lot of Trump Stein voters in that independent camp that just see Robinson as a little too extreme. Um, you know, it's just not a good look for him. And even though he is lieutenant governor, and really, if he didn't say all that stuff, he probably would be in a much better position. I would probably put this in likely Democrat. Now, I know you don't think it's that strong for Stein, but why don't you give your analysis here?
Yeah, I definitely do agree that Mark Robinson's been running a pretty bad campaign as of right
Yeah,
now.
horrible.
He's been largely painted as an extremist, which he is, like supporting like full abortion bans, Holocaust denial, a bunch of crazy stuff. So yeah, and also yeah, pairing that with the fact that Democrats have won statewide office decently regularly, more than you'd think actually in North Carolina. I think the Democrats are definitely favored, at least as of right now. I wouldn't go as far to say they'd get it above five, and put it like I would probably say I'd probably put it in a lean margin actually, like just below that with him winning by like 3 to 4, Josh Stein. I would say this because even in 2020, with the broadly popular incumbent governor running, Roy Cooper only won by 4 points. And that kind of leads me to believe that a non-incumbent in Josh Stein won't be able to achieve that level of success in the race. And also, on the presidential level, of course, North Carolina has a tendency to vote for Republicans. So I don't know. I just kind of feel that uh that top of the ticket poll won't be able to push Josh Stein to a crazy five plus point victory. I think it'll be decently close, but I at the end of the day, I do agree with you that Josh Stein, the Democrat, is favored.
Yeah, we'll put it in lean right now because I think you know, when we're looking at North Carolina, it's fine to put it as lean right now. You have a good point about the presidential race pulling Robinson to a potentially better margin, so I will give you that much. There's also, you have generally good points about the margins in North Carolina, just not being that crazy for Democrats. We'll put it there for now, but I'm still convinced it's likely. Anyways, we'll just move on to the state of New Hampshire. I just don't feel too strongly about, the margin there. I could see it either way. New Hampshire, we have uh, and a very interesting race here again, which New Hampshire hasn't had many interesting governor races for a while because of Chris Sununu, the Republican who has won 4 terms in the state at decent margins, even though, New Hampshire votes to the left in presidential races and Senate races, but has favored him as their governor choice for a while as a Republican. Now, Kelly Ayotte, which is the former U.S. senator, she is a first, I would consider like a first round pick for the nomination on the Republican side. Obviously she has very high name rec as a former U.S. senator. People are trying to recruit her to run for Senate 2 years ago, and she denied it, which I think was a good choice because she probably would have lost. But now in this governor race, which is now an open seat, she looks pretty good. And on the Democrat side, we have Joyce Craig, who is the former mayor of Manchester, the largest city in New Hampshire, which is also a decent pick, but I would say is not really at Ayote's tier. Um, yeah, and Ayotte is likely going to win this primary against Chuck Morse, who was a candidate for Senate in 2022. It was a decent candidate, but ultimately he fell short. And so Ayotte's likely going to win this by a landslide. The primary, Joyce Craig looks favored to win, although I guess it's not an open and shut case just yet.
Yeah.
So we have an interesting race that's building up to be, I think, Ayotte favored, but by not by much. I think Joyce Craig would be a stronger candidate here than Cindy or Sind Warmington. But ultimately, even if they do put up Craig, I think Ayotte's favored. She has better name rec. She has this new endorsement who is popular in New Hampshire. And I think New Hampshire's going to continue their trend of voting for Republican governors. I'm going to put this one in lean Republican.
Yeah, I personally would put it a little closer. I'd put it in tilt Republican for now. The reason I say this is we don't have a lot of recent polling. For some reason, all the New Hampshire polls that have been coming out recently have not been polling the governor's race. Likely, I'd say because the primaries in the state haven't wrapped up, and they're some of the last primaries in the latest primaries rather in the nation. Um, but yeah, like I will note, yeah, New Hampshire's a pretty blue state, at least on the federal level. Votes for Democrats for the House of Representatives, votes for Democrats in the Senate, votes for them for the presidency too. Biden won by 7 points, and Harris is largely favored in the state going into 2024. But yeah, you do make a good point that at the statewide level, for statewide offices, Republicans are still doing quite well in this blue leaning state. So yeah, I think for that, I think I would say Io is definitely the slight favorite, but you never know. I think we need more polling data, and because I think there's definitely a possibility that the poll from the presidential race is just too much for her to overcome. Um, like for example, in 20, I believe it was, yeah, in 2016, Io only overperformed Trump by 0.2. That's like pretty close to how the presidential ticket went. And if if the presidential race and the governor's race are somehow correlated going into 2024, that's a tick against Io there. That's some bad news for her. So I don't think it's open and shut yet. I'd put it tilt R, but things can change.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at the 2016 governor race, which I think is interesting, it had the incoming governor run for Senate in Maggie Hassan, which she won over Ayotte, and obviously she ceded her seat, and Sununu was able to pick it up as a Republican. Sununu ran ahead of now President Trump by a few points. Now, if you have Ayotte, who also ran behind this race, now running for governor, she doesn't have the incumbency advantage of the governor that you can see Sununu, built over time, over these years. And it's okay for now. I don't feel very strongly about either race. We can put this in either lean or tilt. Doesn't affect the ultimate prediction of the balance of power. We have 27 Republican governorships and 23 for the Democrats. And that means we are staying with the same number on either party because there are zero flips. So 27 Republican governors, 23 Democrat governors we have forecasted for the balance of power at the statewide level in the next 2 years, or I guess the next year. I guess technically Virginia has a chance And yeah, it's gonna be interesting because even if Democrats were able to win New Hampshire, Republicans would still own the majority of governorships. So it seems impossible for them to even break even.
I will note
And that's
though,
about it.
in
Yeah.
terms of
So,
population, Democrats are still winning on that front in terms of the amount of population of governorships with like New York, Michigan, California, big states in our column, and North Carolina as well. So I will say that. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone doubts that. Obviously, when you have just Cali and New York, I think that's already a lot. It's already 95 electoral votes or something, right? So, anyways, wrapping it up. Thanks for watching, guys. This is our prediction. Quick and easy governor prediction for you guys. Like the video, subscribe down below. Ring that bell for future predictions. Probably house prediction. We got to get one out eventually.
so much work
Um,
though.
yeah, so much work, but we'll get it done for you guys. Comment down below if you think the New Hampshire or North Carolina race could go a different way, maybe, and share this video with your family and friends. Thanks for watching, guys.
See you guys.